get to L'Oreal. The shares in the company have been sinking in US trade after North Asia sales came in 5 percentage points below what analysts had penciled in. Overall revenue growth came in less than expected to, up 6% in the fourth quarter at more than 11 billion euros, though North American revenues did beat expectations. Let's get out to Charlotte for more. Charlotte, you and I have spoken a lot about whether we've gone peak beauty. There are so many competitors in the marketplace now, and there's been a lot of buying of beauty products. What were the numbers showcasing?
Well, look, it was interesting because you had smaller competitor Estée Lauder reporting their numbers, and they talked about double-digit growth in China in particular. That kind of upped the pressure on the results on L'Oreal, and the results came in disappointing. As you were saying, North Asia up 0.6% in Q4, up 0.5% overall for the full year. So they said they saw an acceleration and a stabilization in that region, but certainly things are not as good as expected. And that's despite strong results in North America, where sales were up 8.6%. Like-for-like in Q4. Europe as well, up 6.6%. So overall, Q4 really showed an acceleration. Of course, it is the festive season. You know, people get perfumes for Christmas and things like that. But certainly, overall, the numbers were a little bit disappointing. Full-year sales up 4% like-for-like to 44 billion euros. And that's despite, seeing growth in all the regions, in all the divisions, and again, an acceleration in the second half. Now, of course, when you talk about luxury, you talk about China, and here again, things were disappointing. They said that China was more of a luxury story, and the US was more about dermatological product, because it's again looking at the different divisions. Consumer products, the brands like Garnier, for example, that was up 4%. Luxury, one that had seen, of course, a slowdown, like we've seen overall in the luxury division, one that boomed after COVID, but saw a slowdown, a bit of a recovery in Q4. They're up 4.5%. Dermatological, with brands like La Roche-Posay and Vichy, one that's still very successful, up 11.5% in Q4. So I had a chance to catch up with the CEO of L'Oreal, Nicolas Hieronimus, exclusively to talk about the results. And we had a look over the whole results for 2025.
For us, 2025 has been a very defining year. First of all, I think it has shown the resilience of L'Oreal in a very volatile environment with tariff, geopolitical tensions, and lots of changes in the consumer mindset. And despite that, we've, as you mentioned, grown above the market, and more importantly, accelerated quarter after quarter. And I tell you, we intend to continue to accelerate. But it was also a very defining year, and I guess we'll get back to that, because we have invested tremendously in the transformation of L'Oreal, both on the tech side, in IT, but also in M&A, with, amongst others, the acquisition of Kering Beauty. So that's, I think, a year that puts us in a great position to accelerate into the future. Now, going back to your question of what were the key accelerating factors, I think for me, what I want to highlight is the acceleration of our two biggest countries on the second half, whether China, that moved for us from +1 to +5 between first and second half. That confirmed the acceleration of the market. It's not, it's a modest acceleration, but we've outperformed it. So that is very promising for the future. And also our acceleration in the US, where the market has remained dynamic, but we've increased from 2 to 4%, particularly with an acceleration of our mass market division that was lagging behind, and from our dermatological beauty division. So China was more a luxe story, and the US dermatological beauty and mass market acceleration. And the final element, before you have another question, e-commerce is a key factor for us. It's 30% of our business now. We grow double digits faster than the market, and that's really where most of the market growth comes from. And our capacity to win in e-commerce is a very important element of our performance.
Right, so let's dive into all this, because Q4 kind of reflect a lot of the trends that you just mentioned there. North America up 8.6% in Q4 like-for-like, so the strongest region this quarter. It wasn't the strongest region overall for the year. So is the Q4 quarter a reflection of the trend that you expect to see in 26, with North America really coming back to the...
Well, we intend to continue on that momentum very clearly, because we had, if I look at my 4 divisions, fantastic performance of professional, and hair care is overall a very strong category for us. We had a pretty solid L'Oréal Luxe performance across the year. But as it's mostly driven by fragrance, it has accelerated in sell-through at the end of the year. And we're a bit unhappy in the beginning of the year with our mass market performance, which was very dependent on makeup. So we really doubled down on innovation. And so for LDB, where I think CeraVe lacked a little bit innovation at the beginning of the year, so our famous beauty stimulus plan, where we really increased and stepped up in innovation on all divisions, fragrance too, by the way, has really led us to accelerate on second half. And that's what makes me ambitious for 2026.
A little dive there in the results of L'Oréal in this exclusive interview. Now, interesting that e-commerce grew double-digit in 2025, passing the 30% mark. So, they said they're really looking into this, how AI is affecting how people are choosing products online. So all this was very interesting. Of course, 2025 was important for L'Oréal because they made this huge acquisition, the biggest in their history, with Kering Beauty. So they will be able to develop beauty for the brands like Balenciaga, for example, Creed, Bottega Veneta, and further down the line, Gucci as well. So there's lots of growth potential there as well. And they increased their stake in Galderma, the injectable beauty, as well, to 20%. They said they're looking more and more in this sort of area as well for future growth. So all this interesting. They did outperform the market last year. They said they will continue to outperform the market in 26 and want to accelerate compared to 25. But of course, all focus will be on these disappointing results in China.
Interesting wrap up there in the context, Charlotte, where it's been a fascinating week across the luxury space. The results in the context where Kering shares are up nearly 9% for the week, the owner of Gucci, after sales fell less than expected in the fourth quarter. Hermes, EssilorLuxottica also reported numbers this week and are outperforming broader European equities. What jumped out to me, Charlotte, was the comment from the Kering CEO this week talking about the price hikes, the bonanza post-pandemic that contributed to the slide that they've seen in the business. I feel somewhat justified by this because we had these conversations for many, many months about the increases these companies were pushing onto customers. It feels like that has ended now, but what does that mean for margins for investors?
Yes, absolutely. I feel there's finally a reckoning there for the luxury sector on how the price hikes have been just too aggressive, and they've lost basically the aspirational buyer. A lot of these buyers actually pivoted to beauty. So that was interesting how the impact, if big luxury brands in fashion are lowering their prices, the impact this could have on beauty, because that became the bridge to the aspirational buyer. So really interesting to hear this comment on prices. And they said that looking at Gucci, for example, at Kering, they're looking at having some more accessible prices there as well. And that it is working, looking at their sales there. So really interesting. But again, Kering, the outlier last year, the shares really popping because it is a self-help story, and investors are looking at self-help stories at the moment until they know how the luxury sector and the luxury demand will be looking in 2026. So in that moment, self-help is still very much the top story in luxury.
Thank you so much. That is Charlotte. A fantastic wrap up.